Mariela is going to talk to us today about how we can help our learners become self-directed learners, a skill that we often relate to adult learners. We often talk about adults being self-directed. Hi, hello. Let me introduce Mariela. She has a master's in TESOL and not one, but two subjects that really blend very, very nicely together. A very impressive portfolio she's got. She's been Macmillan's academic consultant, field editor, commissioning editor, and right now she is the publisher for Macmillan's American English primary and pre-primary segment. 16 years of experience with Macmillan education. Um, Mariela also says that she enjoys visiting schools, talking to teachers, and doing research into what works and what doesn't work for teachers. So clearly someone like the rest of us who is really into her professional development, who loves learning and doesn't ever stop learning. So today, Mariela Gil, you're talking to us about how children can be self-directed learners. I'm going to hand the microphone on to Mariela. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you, Tia, for that amazing introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? Hello. I see people from Brazil, from Japan. Yes, 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 you can hear me. Excellent. I joined about half an hour ago and I was fascinated listening to Anna's talk and also to Tia's introduction and her discussion about what's been happening today. This is very exciting and I'm honored and excited to be a part of it. So let me see if I can get a hang of these controls. There we go. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about self-direction in the young learner's classroom. Chia has already told you a little bit about me, but before I got into the topic of today, I just wanted to, because we're not there in person, tell you a little bit about me. So I'm not just this voice and a little video in the corner there. I grew up between Caracas, Venezuela, and Southern California in the US. I also went to college in Southern California. I went to USC where I got a degree in linguistics and psychology and also my master's in TESOL. And then I was lucky enough to travel around the world and teach. I taught in Thailand, I taught in Mexico, and I taught a lot in the US, specifically in Miami, where I'm based now. And as Chia said, I've been working at Macmillan for many years. And the topic that interests me the most, that fascinates me really, is how children develop, how they grow, and how what we know about their development can be implemented into making our classrooms better so that they can learn better. So I can see that people are joining from all over. I'm very pleased to meet you too. I would like to take a quick poll though. Where are you joining from? Can you take a moment and click? I did my best to include the world in, I hope I didn't miss any part of the world. Even deciding which continents and how to name the continents can be very controversial. So let's see what people say. Oh my goodness, Pakistan, Argentina, Europe, Ukraine, Mexico, Indonesia, hello. Wow, wow, this is amazing. Actually, this is truly humbling. So Sonali, if I guess, yes, can you please complete the poll? Hopefully people will have just clicked and we can get a view of where people are. All right, let's see. 26%. Okay, so we've got people in Asia, Europe, and the UK. It doesn't seem like we've got anybody from Africa today. Middle East, North America, Central America, South America. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much for letting me know. And Let's see if I can get back to the presentation. There we go. Great. Okay, so let's get on to the topic of today. Here we go. What helps students feel ready to learn and be willing to learn? As you know, we get a variety, children come to our classrooms with all of their experience, with what they know from home, with what is going on in their lives. What do you find helps students feel ready and willing to learn? Feel free to put things in the chat box. In the meantime, I'll tell you what I mean by ready to learn and willing to learn. In this context, I mean ready that they have the tools and that they have the skills to learn so that they come to the classroom at a place where they can start. And willing is that they are actually feeling like doing it, that they have the desire to learn, that they are excited about learning. Yes, I see interesting topics, appealing stimuli, motivation, right. So the other side of this question, what stops students from feeling willing and ready to learn? As you can imagine, there are lots of things that can happen. And one of the things that can happen is that they feel that the classroom is irrelevant, that what's happening in the classroom is irrelevant, and that decreases their motivation. And sometimes as teachers, we might inadvertently be part of that. For example, something might be happening in the classroom that is exciting to the children, and they want to participate. So they try, they want to raise their hand. They want to tell you about what happened at home or what they know about this. They want to share with everybody in the classroom that there's something that they know about this. Basically, they want to connect. They want to connect to the teachers. They want to connect to their peers. They want to connect to the topic. And sometimes because we have an agenda, we have things that we need to get through, we need to get to the end of the lesson, we have a test to prepare for, etc., we may not have the time or the ability in that moment to allow all of those connections to happen. So that can be demotivating, and it can make the classroom feel irrelevant or the topic far from where the student is. Even students that are feeling that the topic is relevant, that what happens in the classroom is relevant, they may have skills that they need to be working on that don't allow them to quite grasp and connect. So I would like to pose that finding opportunities in the classroom for self-direction will help you make your classroom, will help the students be engaged, and will help make what happens in class more relevant so that they see why it's important to do it, even when they may not always have the chance to connect and say what it is that is on their mind and what they wish they could be talking about. Okay, so opportunities for self-direction in the classroom. Let's talk about what this can be. We are going to be looking at these, we're going to be going through this agenda today. We're going to be looking at what self-direction is, why it's important, what self-directed students look like, and how you can implement some tips. We're going to have the last third of the talk is going to be a series of suggestions for how you can build some of this into the classroom. Okay, so starting with a definition. This is what I mean by self-directed learners. A self-directed learner is a student that understands that they can influence their learning, and then they take steps to do so. Okay, so this may seem obvious as adults that we make so many choices as students and as learners about how to study, when to study, about paying attention, whether we take notes. But actually, it is not necessarily that obvious to kids that they can impact their own learning, unless it may be to some, but it's useful for us to know that them knowing this is important. Now, in this talk, I'm always going to be talking about students and teachers. So for a teacher, what does this mean? A teacher can help students to develop the skills to influence their own learning. But that's not enough. They also need to give opportunities to do so. Because if we make all the decisions and we control every last moment of the lesson, there may not be enough space for them to practice those skills. Hopefully that's making sense. So let me tell you a little bit more about self-directed learning. You can think about self-directed learning in a continuum that goes from one extreme, incidental. Sorry, the words got a little bit disconnected there, but that says incidental, and then all the way to the other extreme, pure self-directed learning. So on this continuum, what we're going to see is that the amount of responsibility that a child takes or that a student takes for their learning is going to vary from almost no responsibility to complete responsibility. And in this talk, we're going to be talking about responsibility in learning, agency, and taking ownership of learning. Because what the learner needs to know is that they are at the heart of their own learning. The learner needs to be the one driving the learning, or at least knowing that they can. So I'll give you a little bit information about the two extremes first of the continuum. On the left, we have what is called incidental. This is typically a classroom where there isn't a deliberate attempt to build self-directed learning into it. So the focus is usually on the subject matter. In the case of English language teaching, the focus will be on teaching English. In the case of any other subject area, it could be whatever, math, geography, etc. So in an ELT classroom, you might find a classroom that is purely in this section and never veers into the middle of the continuum is one where probably the teacher would be very focused on accuracy, not giving a lot of space for fluency, not giving a lot of space for group work or for pair work or for children having some opportunity to choose what they do. So here the focus is on getting the language right. And because the focus is on getting the language right, children won't have a lot of space to develop other skills. Yeah. I had an experience when I was in high school in this. I had, like all of us, I'm sure, all kinds of classroom experiences, but one sticks with me in this realm. I had a biology teacher that in high school would have us, his entire lesson would be that he would dictate the textbook to us, and we had to take the dictation and write everything that he was saying. Now, to give him credit, he had memorized the textbook. So he wasn't using the textbook to do his dictation. He would just recite it. And then we would check, and sure enough, he was dictating exactly what was in there. So he didn't miss anything in the text, but what he did miss was giving us space to develop as learners and, of course, of igniting our passion for learning. So that's one extreme. Now let's look at the other extreme. On the green and yellow side of things, you can see that it says self-planned and pure self-directed learning. So as at the far end of pure self-directed learning, here learners take total responsibility for learning. It's all on them. They're not sharing it with a teacher. Students are deciding what it is they study, how they study it. They're pacing everything. So most people are familiar with the dissertation process. When people get their PhD and they work on their final project, they, yes, I'm just seeing the notes. The biology class was pretty terrible. Okay, so the dissertation process in the pure self-directed learning spectrum, that is where the PhD students decide what they're going to research. They decide how they're going to research it. They use the professor as an expert that they access, but they are the ones driving it all. They decide when they have enough data, they decide how they're going to publish, etc. There are actually in the K through 12 sector of education, there are pure self-directed learning schools. I don't know if anybody has heard of these, but there are schools called Sudbury schools. The first one was, I think the first one was created in Massachusetts, and it's very famous. There's a book about it. Basically, these are called democratic schools. And the idea is that everything in the school is run by students. Students decide on the curriculum. I'll tell you the name of the book at the end of the talk. Students decide on the curriculum. Students run the school. They have jobs in the school. There are adults, but they are staff. They don't necessarily run the school, and they are there as support, but the students have the responsibility. They decide what they go to school, and it's a school with mixed ages. They decide what they're going to do that day, uh, who they're going to work with. They're on different committees, and they bring an organized expert, subject area experts. So they might ask somebody in the community to come and speak to them and support them on projects, etc. It's a pretty radical and amazing thing. There's one, in fact, in Miami, and I've been to their open house. It's really interesting. So that's on the pure self-directed learning side, the yellow side of things. And then in the green, as you go just a tiny bit more towards the middle of the spectrum, you have an area where students and teachers are collaborating on co-creating together the plan for the learning. So that might be something you might find in community activities where there are younger people involved with community experts, and they're working together towards a common goal. This, I think, also belongs very much on the right hand of the continuum. Those are the. Now let's look at what's in the middle. Most of our classrooms are somewhere in the middle, probably a little bit towards the incidental and going into the purple and the blue, where we start to build some agency, build some ownership of learning, and where we'd start to build a little bit of management, a little bit of how do I do something differently? How do I manage the pace of what I'm learning? So this is the focus of the presentation, and here are the tips that we're going to be talking about. And basically what I'd like to say is that if you're aware of this concept of self-direction in the classroom and of aiming to embed it in your lessons, aiming to integrate it in your lessons, and aiming to tell students what it is you're doing, this is something that is going to make your classrooms more relevant and engaging. Now that I've given you a little bit of information about this continuum, where you go all the way from, I'm not trying to do this very much, to all we're doing is students are directing, I'd like to get a poll of where you feel you might be in the continuum now. So you're going to get 3 choices. Incidental, I don't focus on it yet. It might happen sometimes. Collective agency to self-managed. Sometimes I have group work, I have pair work. Sometimes they manage an activity, or they might have a project outside of class. And then the final one, self-planned to pure SDL, would be it's all on them. The responsibility is theirs. So if you can take a moment to vote which one of those you might find yourself in. I'll give you a second. Yes, I see that somebody's saying they're in the second. Most, I think, from the classrooms that I've observed, people do give children a chance to do, yes, most people are saying the second, the second, the second. Okay, thank you. Second. All right, so no surprises there. Oh, wow. So there are some people who are giving students a lot more responsibility. I'll be very interested in seeing what you think about what we're talking about today. Okay. So yes, no surprises there. Thank you for closing the poll. Let's get back to presentation. Okay. So why teach skills in a language learning classroom? Why teach skills in a classroom at all? Why teach self-directed skills? And when it is so important to use the time we have to get them to, in our case, learn English or other subject areas. I know you have a lot to plan, to deliver, to grade, to check. Why is self-direction worthy of your stretched agenda? Of course, knowledge is important, but the reason self-direction and building these skills is so important is because knowledge growing exponentially. If we focus purely on knowledge in our classroom, whether it's knowledge of a language or knowledge of anything else, we are doing our children a disservice. On the slide, you'll see that the way that what we know, everything that we know about how the world works, things that we've built, artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology, all these things that are happening around us, this knowledge is growing to the degree that is difficult to comprehend. But just to give you an idea, in 1900, knowledge was doubling every 100 years, right? So every 100 years, we knew double what we used to know 100 years earlier. By 1950, the amount of knowledge that we were gaining has grown so much that now it was doubling every 25 years. This was just after World War II. Now what we know is every 25 years we're getting double the knowledge. Today, knowledge is doubling every day. That is just, to me, that's almost impossible to comprehend. How it is that every day we're gaining so much knowledge that what's happening, you may have heard of this, is that people are expecting the jobs that our children, the children that we're educating today, the jobs that they are going to have available to them when they graduate, when they're ready to enter the workforce, a large percentage of them haven't been invented yet. They don't exist right now. Yes, yes. So I'm seeing your comments. Yes, there is a lot of input, there is a lot to manage, and this is why there are different skills that we have to integrate into our classrooms so that children are able to manage this ever-changing environment that's happening now. So, what can we do? What can self-directed learners do? Let's see, there we go. What can self-directed learners do that can help in this kind of environment and that can help them be prepared to enter the workforce? These are some of the things that self-directed learners can do. They can set learning goals. They can take initiative. They can decide they're going to start something. They're going to do something. They can diagnose their own learning needs. What is it that I actually need right now? What do I need to understand? What is not quite working for me? They can identify the resources for learning. What's available to me? So do I have people that I can access that can help me? Do I need material resources? They can choose which learning strategies I see there are some connection issues. Hopefully you can still hear me. They can choose to see which learning strategies they use, and they can evaluate their learning outcomes. And I can see they're saying a lot of training. Yes, it does require a lot of training, but you're already doing part of it. That's what I'm going to show you in a minute. A lot of this, because they're practices that are things that teachers already do as part of teaching a good lesson, we just need to pull them together and have the vision and explain why we're doing things. So yes, language is not changing so quickly, but if we only teach them the language and we don't help them with the skills, then they're not going to be very well prepared. So if you look at this list of things that a self-directed learner can do, and you take out the learning words from it, what you have is this: set goals, take initiative, diagnose needs, identify resources. If you look at this list, what you see is what any adult out there, what you yourself, what you want your peers, maybe your spouses, any adult out there to be able to do to get things done. That's why this is important to embed into our classrooms. Because if we don't teach this directly, if we don't talk about it, if we don't get our students in the habit of it, they are going to come out of the classroom and not be ready. So let's look at what the classroom looks like. Self-direction can happen in a classroom, will develop in a classroom when learning goals are clear to everyone, both the teacher and the students. When students have opportunities to take initiative. When teachers are talking with the students about their learning and their needs. When there are resources available for learning, whether they are human or material or both. Classrooms where self-direction grows is where teachers support students in choosing the appropriate strategies for them. And where students know how it is that their learning outcomes are going to be assessed. So all of these things are things that you might already be doing, or you may be doing some of them in your classroom. You may just not have been looking at them with the lens of self-directed learning. So going back to that middle bit, this is the middle part of the continuum where most of us are. And this is the kind of these are the kind of activities that need to be happening in this middle bit for self-directed learning to grow. So having some student choice or initiative, having some pair and group work, building some student agency, where there's some self-assessment of the own learning, some level of controlling pace, and where the teacher is guiding. So let's take a look at how to start to add self-directed learning to your classroom. These are the tips that we're going to now move on to look at one by one. With all of the tips that we're going to go through, I would like to suggest that you guide your students through them, that you always talk about what you're doing and why. This will help students not only learn the tips, implement and learn and have the skills, but also understand why you're doing them and why they are doing them. So let's start by setting goals and objectives. At the beginning of the year, when you start your year and students are fresh and ready to go, this is a good time to start talking about why they're here. What are the broad goals for the class? Not all students may be ready to do this, so you might need to come ready to prompt them. Maybe have to help them have reasons for learning English ready for them. It may be learning how to sing their favorite song in English correctly, or speaking to a native English speaker, or watching movies in English, or traveling to an English-speaking country. So if at the beginning of your year you set your broad goal, why are we here? Why is learning English a good thing? Then that is something that you can refer back to during the year. One way to document this is to have them write it in their notebooks. You could also have a bulletin board in the classroom where different students, where you have their goal for the end of the year, what they want to be able to do in English at the end of the year, up on one of the walls. Another way to do this might also be for students to write a letter to themselves about what they want to be able to do at the end of a year, or a little postcard. So if they already have some English, you can also have them think about what they're already strong at. Anna was referring to growth mindset earlier. And growth mindset, starts with understanding where we are strong, where we already have something to build on, and that gives us confidence. So in thinking about at the beginning of the year, when you have your children, think about what they want to do at the end, what broad goals they want with English. Have them also think about what they can already do, if they can already do something. Okay, now let's talk about at a lesson level. When you're okay, when you're preparing, when you're planning your lesson, you usually most people need to put in their lesson plans what the lesson objective is. So in all likelihood, you are already doing this, preparing the lesson objective. I've seen many classes where the teacher writes the lesson objective at the beginning of the class on the board. So it's visible to the students what they're working on, right? And it might be, you might write it in depending on the lesson, depending on the style of aims that you do, it might look something like this. By the end of this lesson, students will be able to understand and use the past tense. It might be something about vocabulary. It might be about functional language, whatever the wording is. Make the objective visible, but then take it a step further. Talk to the students about what that means. So say that you're doing this about the past tense. Say that your lesson is about the past tense, whether it's regular and irregular verbs. Ask the students when they would use the past tense in their regular life and elicit some responses. Have them hold that when you're in the lesson, and at the end of the lesson, refer back to that concrete thing in real life that objective connects to. So whether it is telling my friends about what I did on the weekend, whether it is talking about what I did on the summer break, or what I did last night, or what happened at home. All of these things are things that make the objective and the reason why they're sitting in your classroom doing these particular activities relevant. Okay? So on the slide, you'll see before class, during class. You can refer to during class to the objective. You can remind them of what they already know, what they're working on, and why. And then at the end of the lesson, go back to it. And whether you use can-do statements or you refer right back to the objective, check in with them and have them tell you whether now they can. Okay? You'll notice in most of the tips that I'm going to give you that there's a lot of self-awareness and self-reflection being built. And these are key skills that enable self-direction. So we want children to be proactive, as Chia was saying, not just tie their shoelaces, but say, that they're interested in learning and show it. By them understanding what it is they're working on and having some self-awareness, you're going to make that easier. You're going to make the engagement, and they're going to feel that they have power to do so. So let's talk a little bit more about giving them power, and that is with choice. One of the things that we want people to do when they are outside of school is to have initiative, to start things, to feel like they can do things. And to build that into the classroom, if we do everything for them and we decide everything for them and we don't give them the chance to practice taking initiative, then how are they going to get better at it? Again, going back to Anna's talk, the practice, right? So developing initiative starts with choice. What kind of choice? How can we build moments of choice into our lesson? You probably already do some of this, if not all of it. So you can give some element of choice in some examples like which text to read, or which project to do within a general theme or topic, or the other way around, which topic to choose for a project. Activities, maybe even within a lesson, or choice within an activity. You can have classroom votes. You can have them choose how they review, whether they want to go back to the song that you were all doing, or whether they want to review with flashcards, whether the class needs to divide up into 2 or 3 groups to do a certain review. So all of these are moments where you're giving them the practice to exercise choice. And you can take it even further by doing what it says at the bottom, discussing the criteria for choice. So when you ask children to make a choice, bring to the surface, ask them to tell you why. So if they've said, for example, yes, the song at the beginning of the lesson, oh, teacher, we want to sing, X song. Okay, why? Why do you think that's a good suggestion? and accept their responses. If they have made an acceptable choice, then whatever their criteria was for making that choice is acceptable. But you can talk about it, and then you can add as a teacher. I feel that it's important for teachers to sometimes slip more into the role of facilitator and guide. So you watch them you watch them develop, and then you talk about it alongside them. So you tell them, yeah, that's a really good choice. And that's a good reason. And then there's this other reason why that song is a good choice. And you tell them so that now that they have stored that and they have that way of thinking about their learning. You see? So it's not terribly different from something you may already be doing. What's different is that now you've put on the glasses, the lenses of self-direction. What is this doing to build self-direction in my students? To build that agency, that ability to know that I can do something, I can make a decision, I can influence, I can change the way I learn. Okay, so let's move on to talk a little bit about group work. I apologize for my slides, they've gone all wonky, but hopefully you can read that it says giving opportunities for initiative with group work. So working in groups can be motivating and engaging. And it can allow children to have initiative, and teenagers as well. What is it about group work that does that? Have you thought about this? What is it about working in groups that allows for children to have more choice and more initiative? Yes, many kind. Yes, a sense of independence. See, the thing is that group work, by definition, puts the focus of the moment on the people in the group. The teacher is now slightly outside facilitating, maybe walking around the classroom looking at the children. Yes, they feel more comfortable. They take responsibility. So when the teacher is in that moment in facilitator mode, walking around, monitoring, checking, children have more space. And you've hit on it. Yes, they're getting support from their partners. They're feeling more confident. And because the teacher isn't the focus and the teacher isn't dictating how to move from one thing to the next, who fills that role? Students have to rise up and fill that role. Students have to think about what's the next step. Who doesn't? Do we work together at the same time? Do we work in parallel? All these things are choices that they need to exercise, that they need to practice, and that the teacher can then be in a great place because the teacher can be observing what's happening and then facilitating and giving suggestions and guiding. So that's the beauty of group work. So now there's all kinds of group work. Again, group work can help students create diverse opportunities for initiative because even within group work, there are moments of working alone, and some students need that. Not everybody thinks well with people talking to them at the same time. So there are moments of working alone. There are moments of pairing up. You can also have small group work. One of the things that I'd like to suggest is that you consider when children are going to work in groups, that you consider setting up roles. So what do I mean by roles? Every person in the group is responsible for doing something, and every person in the group depends on the other people doing that. This is one of the basic tenets of cooperative learning, that there is positive interdependence between the team members, that everybody in the team depends on the other, but that everybody in the team is responsible for their bit. So if the teacher sets roles up, that's a way of scaffolding group work. That's a way of helping them build the skills to be self-starters, to take initiative, but within a certain controlled and limited place with boundaries. So examples of roles. I don't know if anybody has any handy. For example, if you're going to have them work on something that they're going to present, there could be the speaker. There could be the person that has the role of taking notes. There could be a person that has the role of keeping time. You can have different children can decide, or you can help them decide and say, they're going to be different sections that you're going to work on. You're going to work on the introduction paragraph, you're going to work on the middle paragraph, and you're going to work on the end. I mean, depending on what type of work you're doing. So if there are roles, you're inserting an intermediate step for self-direction. Pure self-direction, children organize themselves, they would decide everything. But in the middle bit of the continuum, where you're helping them build the skills, you scaffold them. So you're setting the project, there may be some choice of topic, or you're setting the activity. Maybe there is no choice of activity, but the choice is in the roles of how people interact in the activity. Or you may set up the roles. You may even tell each student, number them 1, 2, 3, and 4, or A, B, and C, and each A gets a certain role. The level of scaffolding depends on you. But that is one way to support building group work and develop this initiative. Now let's think a little bit about the other, one more aspect of self-directed learning. So we said that self-directed learners take initiative. They also need to understand their needs, and they need to understand what resources are available to them. So how can you guide students to understand their needs and resources? One of the things that is really important that you do is that you narrate the learning strategies that you use when you're using them. Narrate what you see them doing. What do I mean by narrate? You make what's happening explicit, as if you were watching a tennis match and you're just telling them what's happening. And you can do this about yourself as well. So let me give you an example. Say that we're doing a reading lesson. And in this lesson, we're talking about using images to understand context or predicting. So you might read a little and then stop and narrate. And the narration would be something like, I wonder what will happen next. Before I turn the page, I can see on this picture that the boy looks surprised. That makes me think that something happened. What does that make you think? Let's turn the page and see. So you've just made explicit how a good reader reads, how a good reader predicts from text, how a good reader is thinking of what's happening next. And then when you finish reading with them, you can remind them of the strategy you used. Do you remember when we stopped and wondered what would happen next? And we used the pictures to guess? Good readers do this without realizing they do this. So when you're reading, always make sure you take a moment to look at the pictures and see what they tell you. That would be narrating a learning strategy. That would be helping them not only understand the strategy, but understand that it is one. That it's not that people are just born being amazing at things, but that actually you learn how to do them and they can choose the strategies that you give them in their toolbox. Okay, so just like when you narrate and you choose a learning strategy, you make it more explicit, you can do this with all self-directing skills, self-directed learning skills. Make them explicit. Tell them why you're doing something in the classroom. When you spot a child doing something well, encourage them. Offer commentary on what they are, what they're doing, what they're learning, or what their needs are. I see you're rereading to find an answer. That's a really good learning strategy. So when you spot something, a student doing something well, narrate it. So then other children as well see, yes, exactly what this person has just written. Students copy each other. So they say, ah, yeah, I do that too. And they do it. So let's see, let's talk a little bit about building in moments for self-assessment. I see that I'm almost running out of time. So Chia must be counting. I can almost get there, Chia. Okay, let's talk a little bit about self-assessment. So when during the lesson, when children are engaged in activities, make sure that they know that when you're reminding them of what we're doing today, what was that objective, remind them of how they can check that they are getting to that objective. So include dialogue during review. These are some examples. I don't know how much you can see in the slide. I'm looking on a laptop and it's pretty tiny. But basically, if you talk about what has happened and you allow children to tell you what they think they've learned, you're creating space for them to learn how to reflect. So, for example, key questions that you can ask are, what did I do in this unit? What did I learn? How did I learn it? You might have, and the beauty of talking about this in a classroom is that a classroom is a social moment. So when a teacher facilitates a discussion about what learning has happened, um, children feed off each other. So if one child says, oh, I learned with a song, and another child says, oh, I remember the video we watched and I remember the activity we did, or teacher, I learned to do whatever, then other children join in and they remind each other of other things that have happened. So this is a very worthy conversation of having. What work have we done? What have we learned? And what does each individual, no matter their age, this can be done at 5, 6, 7, it doesn't matter. What did you think helped you learn that? So now another step to add in to this process is how well do you feel you did? If we've been using lesson objectives and we've been looking at can-do statements at the end and linking them to our lesson objectives, then children should be in the habit of thinking of, what can they do now? What can they maybe not do so well yet? And what should they do next? It can be as simple as, do you think you should read again? Do you think you should read something new? Do you think you should practice listening? Do you think we should listen to the song again? So giving them the opportunity to be the ones that say what they think needs to happen helps them build those skills of self-reflection and self-assessment, and then helps them look forward. So I look backwards, and then what happens now? What are the next steps? Okay, we're almost to the end here. I wanted to give you one last suggestion for evaluation that some of you may already do as well. Portfolio. One way to build self-assessment into the classroom is by having children work on portfolios that they can be building either for a term or for the full year. The key to a portfolio is that it's work that students are proud of. In order for you to be developing self-direction skills with a portfolio, you should let the students choose the work. It shouldn't be that the teacher says, today we're going to do this activity for your portfolio. It should be every so often look back and say, which activities do I want to put into my portfolio? What am I proud of? What do I think as a student best represents what I've learned and what I can do in this class? And then they can include commentary on their work. They can say, this is good, this represents how much I can speak, or it depends on what it is that it's included. You can have physical portfolios, you have digital portfolios. Now, my favorite thing to do is to have some way to display them, whether it's an open house for parents to come, or it's outside on the hallways of the school where I've seen amazing things displayed. If students towards the end of the year build some representation of their best work to show, and they can comment on why, you can even have an activity where other students go by with Post-its or with love notes for what they love about other people's work and how much progress other people have made. So again, portfolios are going to help children with their self-assessment skills, but also with the agency, because they're choosing what represents their best work. So we're at the end now, and hopefully you can see that we've talked a little bit about the different parts of the skills, the building self-direction skills in the classroom, from setting goals, goals, broad goals for the year, lesson objectives, and talking about them during the lesson and at the end, taking initiative, building in moments of choice, building in moments for group work, and then the guidance that the teacher gives. So diagnosing the needs, helping them understand what needs to happen next, helping them understand how to choose learning strategies, helping them see what it is happening and why, and then evaluating how they've done and their next steps. Why? What are we training our students to do? Teachers make lots and lots of decisions in the classroom. So let's make our classrooms feel more relevant and empowering to students. If we don't find opportunities for students to take some responsibility, we're training them to be passive. And that's not the adults we want in this world. We want them to be active about their learning and active about life. We expect them to be good students, but good students cannot mean only follow rules, only follow instructions, only do what the teacher tells you to, only study what the teacher tells you to study and do well on tests. We want them to be able to use the tools we're teaching in the classroom now and tomorrow with and without us. So I'd like to leave you with this quote. Each learner, no matter how young, brings with him a rich tapestry of culture, identity, strengths, and values to the learning experience. Our job as educators is not to fill them up, but to listen closely, listen with curiosity, so that we can help them light their fire with a love of learning and a sense of power.